which we did on March 23rd. That is also available on our website, and it'll be available on the same landing page as this one will be after the completion of this webinar. It's about 11:02, and I think things have slowed down. Tracy, Dawn, I think we're probably ready to get started. Libby and Elizabeth, looks like they've moved rooms. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for this Q&A specific follow-up to our digital product creation webinar, our panel discussion discussing 3D fitting for the real world. My name is Jordan Huggins. I'm the marketing manager at Alvanon, but you're not going to hear too much more from me. I just want to go ahead and introduce, if you're not familiar with Alvanon at this point, we are a body technology company focused on using the latest body size and shape data and technology to advise and execute the best fit and sizing strategy for brands all around the world. Really quickly, again, if you're having any technical issues, just chat me directly. There's a chat option in the bottom of your toolkit. You should not be able to enable your audio or video. There will probably not be a Q&A because this entire session is a Q&A follow-up. So at this point, I'd like to just go ahead and briefly introduce your panelists and your hosts. Joining us today, again, we have Libby Wilson, who's a senior manager of technical design at Walmart. We have Elizabeth Kreidick, who is a technical designer at Walmart. And we have Gina Patterson, a senior fit engineering manager at Columbia Sportswear. And joining us from the Alvanon team, we have Kimberly Wick, who is a technical consultant here at Alvanon. Tracy Rickert, a senior consultant at Alvanon. And I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to our executive director of consulting at Alvanon, Don Howard.
Thanks so much, Jordan, and welcome everybody to our follow-up session, 3D fitting in the real world. I have to say we were very positively overwhelmed by the turnout of the session we did, which we thought was going to be the only session. But after the great feedback and the buzz and the volume of questions that we had, we kind of looked at each other and said, we feel kind of obligated to go back out again and try to capture as many of these comments as we can. It just seems like more and more people are very hungry to learn what's actually going on in 3D. And as I said before at Alvanon, we have the privilege of working with so many great companies that have been doing this for a while now. And we also, have the privilege of working with companies who are just starting out on their journey. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking because we've just got such great content to get to. So I really appreciate the panelists for making time in your schedule to come back and join us again. I know they felt obligated to answer a lot of these questions as well. So what we've done is there's so many questions, we tried to bucket them by subject matter. Okay, and we took some time together, went through all the questions and said, hey, there's some themes that are emerging here that people want to hear more about. So Tracy, let's talk a little bit about how we decided to not only bucket, but then kind of prioritize the flow of these topics that were very prominent.
Perfect. Thanks, Don.
You're welcome.
Okay, so as Don said, we had so many questions, we just couldn't get to them all in the few minutes of Q&A at the end of session 1. And so we took all of those questions, downloaded them, and kind of sorted them into key themes. And then things started to shake out a little bit. A lot of people asking the same types of questions about the same types of things. So they kind of fell in nicely into some theme buckets, which is what you're seeing on this slide. A lot around talking about return on investment and the metrics of 3D, which especially when you're starting out, people really want to know, what am I going to get out of using 3D in my product development process? And then we spent a lot of time, as we always do, on the nuts and bolts of day in the life garment evaluation. So after we got done with session 1, the panelists and the Alvanon people were talking about all the questions that came in and thinking of what other kinds of visuals could we share with the audience that would be really helpful to explain how we do what we do in fitting and garment evaluation in 3D. So we have that to share with you today. And then some things around, questions around standards, what's next, 3D skill sets, and how do you work as a team in 3D, because it does kind of change things as a cross-functional team. And you have to sort of figure out what's everyone's role now that 3D is added into the mix. So that is definitely something that you have to figure out, and the team people had a lot of questions about. So one other thing I want to say, we have such great material. We have a lot of material. We will likely fill the 75 minutes. And spoiler alert, the best stuff is kind of middle to end. So if you can stick with us, I think it's worth it. One other topic that I know people were passionate about was fabric. We got a lot of questions about fabric. So our thought is we may even do a third webinar where we specifically dig into the topic of fabric and maybe invite some industry experts to help out and answer some of those questions as well. So more to come on that. We're hopeful that we can pull that together at some point in the near future. Okay, without further ado, let's jump in. So the first question from the audience was, how has 3D fitting impacted the lead times of the product development process and a product life cycle? Gina, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I have some yard work going on behind me, sorry. When it comes to lead times, I think we've been able to definitely cut down. We are able to receive a virtual sample in, I don't know, a third of the time that it would take to cut, sew, and ship a sample. So, and then that gives the team, the tech team, time to look at that pattern, make adjustments if they want, and really work with it and make decisions kind of live. So it definitely has a positive impact on the turn time.
Awesome. So it's in this question and answer session, we wanted to give both Gina at Columbia and the Walmart team time to address some of these questions, because giving just a little bit of background, their situations as a brand and a company in 3D are quite different. Gina's been in it, how many years, Gina? So many.
7, I want to say 7 or 8.
Yeah, yeah. So you guys were kind of industry leaders and in the beginning, and have continued to push 3D throughout your process. And then Walmart has really accelerated in the last couple of years. So the answers are somewhat different, but I think both sides are very interesting. And depending on who you are in the audience and where you are on your digital journey, one might apply more to you than the other. So we want to give both a chance to kind of answer. So
Excellent point.
Yeah. Elizabeth, do you have anything to add on this one?
Yeah, so ours is the same with Gina, but we work a lot up front to reduce the changes later on. So with 3D, we can see multiple iterations within minutes, if not days, whether it's recoloring or pattern corrections or design changes. While if we were waiting for a physical sample, it would take us 2 weeks or more. So
yeah,
Nice.
and with all the situations that are occurring now with shipping and what's happening, you know, with our partners overseas, it can be difficult to get that physical. It's been really difficult as of late. So yeah.
Yeah, you kind of never know when your physical is going to show up, right?
Mhm.
It might make it, it might not make it.
Yeah, 3D is a little bit more dependable.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew we'd be in this situation? Okay, the audience also had questions around like how much of the product that you work on in a given season, what percentage of usage, what percentage of that product would you say you use 3D to do the initial rendering, or 3D as a part of that product development life cycle for that product?
I'll take this one. So I think that it's important to note we really ramped it up, especially during the pandemic. Like you said, we are very proud to have a good percentage in private apparel. You know, it's, you know, wavering on almost 100. So we are super excited to be able to see everything in digital that we'll be seeing in the store as physical. We know that it's not that easy. It took us a long time to get here. It's not like you can just go from 0 to 100 just like that. So this is a good question for those who are curious as to like how they want to start. And we started small, you know, we piloted, you know, we added a little bit more along the way. And it took us a while, just even internally, with changing mindsets, doing that change management with a lot of our internal as well as external, just to get it. And once it starts clicking, then everybody wants to get on board and wants to be a part of it. So it's, you know, and as everything progresses, it'll just become more integral to the process. But it takes a while to get there. It's important to note.
And I think for everyone, you're not alone in that. We hear that, I think, from every brand we work with, that it takes a while. So it's good to level set that out front, that it is going to take a while to ramp up to get there. How about digital assets and kind of who's doing the heavy lifting? How much of your digital assets are done internally by your own team or a specialized team versus having the vendor help you render those digital assets for you? Gina, how about you?
So sorry, am I talking over somebody? No, okay. So we have the factories create those digital assets for us. They're already creating patterns for us. So it just kind of, that process definitely makes sense for us. That being said, we do have our tech team, our fit engineers, also working in the files if it makes sense, and if they see something that they can make a positive impact on and cut down on maybe another prototype, then they have the access to do that as well.
Oh, nice. So does 3D cut down on physical samples really? What would you guys say about that?
Absolutely. I think we have another slide later that might help illustrate this, but where we might need to get another prototype because the first one didn't necessarily reflect the designer's original intent, or just seeing it on body, things kind of change. Maybe it's a new fabric or something like that. So seeing it for the first time rendered, we can, like we said earlier, kind of get another prototype in such a short amount of time with it having been virtually rendered. We can turn two, at least, in the amount of time that it would take to get one in the amount of time it would take to cut and sew a physical sample. So if it makes sense, and if it makes sense within with the design and tech teams, and if it makes sense within the calendar, then absolutely we'll do multiples just to try to get as close to fit approval as possible, or even fit approve.
Awesome. Are either of you guys approving final fit off of 3D and never seeing a physical sample?
Libby, do you want to go first?
It just depends on the category that you work in and the comfortability of your team with using 3D. What is the risk factor if you're looking at something that's, that's based off a block and it's approved and it's good to go? It's easy to go into that type of approval workspace. But if you're like me in a very special category, I feel like swim, outerwear, active, things like that still need to really be looked on a person to get that comfortability, to get that movement. Although there is advances in poses and things like that, and things coming down the pipeline that might help with all of those questions, maybe on some, like, on a different scale, but we're looking at it. I'll say that.
Yeah, we also work with a lot of large units, so yeah.
We have to be very careful about the risk factor there. But we do want to make sure at the end of the day, it's right for the customer.
Gina, were you going to say something about that one?
I think it, yeah, like the Walmart friends said, that it takes it depends on the relationship with a cross-functional team, and it depends on the category and what the risk factor is. I think there are certain categories that really lend themselves to that virtual fit approval, and we don't necessarily need to see a physical sample if it's based on something that we know is tried and true, and we can rely on that reference. Then the cross-functional teams really trust it, and we can move forward. But then there's other things that are just brand new, and it makes it a little more challenging, and we definitely need to see a physical sample. So it really,
Yeah, could I jump in here? Do you make any distinction between things that you really know are verified? Like, is there any language internally that you could say, hey, you know what, here's a category of things that we know are verified that we could actually express through the process? I'm just curious if that's ever come up internally.
it does, but I want to say it's more on a one-off basis when it comes to when designs are initiated at the beginning of a season. And it's that conversation when the design is initially being handed off, and how does the team feel about the entire package, and what does that look like, versus this whole category might lend itself. For us, I don't think we're there yet. It could come, absolutely, but it's still that building of trust that is definitely a factor.
Keyword.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. That was awesome. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about cross-functional alignment. So there were really two big questions that came from the audience about how does the CFT work together in a digital world. The first one was, how does design work with tech design when developing samples in 3D? And Gina, I think we have a visual from you, which is amazing. If you could explain what we're looking at here.
So the one on the left is, these are both examples of how we've worked through from the initial tech sketch to a virtual. The red lines that you see in both of these are design kind of reworking or advising how they would envision this to fit actually on the body, and then what that eventual rework looks like on our model. So it's kind of an organic process that the team has kind of developed of taking that virtual asset and showing, I mean, rather than taping on a garment, they're redlining on a screenshot or directly on the avatar.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I think I've got one more here, Gina. Has it been difficult for designers and merchants not to see physical samples at the stage of the game where you would be doing that redlining? And I guess, what are the perceived barriers to not seeing a sample that you think it's usually design and merch are concerned about? There we go.
So this is another one where, and this is what I was talking about earlier. I don't think this answers your question.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I'll ask Libby in a sec. I think that question was for Libby. I jumped the gun.
So this is another example of how we were able to cut out a prototype, because that initial sketch was not showing all the drag and the kind of blousy effect that design was really hoping for in the upper and lower portions of this cute little number here. So after we got that first rendering, the tech designer or fit engineer in Columbia's case worked directly with design to help adjust how that tech sketch looked. And through the communication with the factory, we were able to get it a lot more close to what they were expecting. And so when we got that physical sample, it was exactly what we were looking for.
Awesome. I just have a question, Gina. Is this third picture, is that digital or is it physical?
That's digital.
Wow. Wow. I thought it was like a picture on an actual mannequin. It looks so realistic.
I know, right?
Wow. That's awesome. Okay. Then now I'll ask Libby. Libby, has it been difficult for designers and merchants not to see physical samples? And what's the perceived barrier there?
Sure. This is a really good question that came up. Our designers, merchants, product developers, before digital came in, they were looking at things on hangers or on a very stylized sketch, or maybe they saw something like they have something on their mood board that's like this really editorial, picture coming from another company or trend site. And it's like, this is how I want it to look. But at the end of the day, our technical team is used to looking at everything on our mannequin and figuring out the proportion and the fit there. So for the technical team, it wasn't as hard, but I know that for the merchants and the designers, we've had to bring them along with us and show them the power of what can be done. And once they see things on digital and then see it in the physical the same way, like on our mannequin or on our fit model, we can kind of help them to calibrate their eye. I know, depending on the skill set of the person or who's making the digital, it might come across, it might not help them take that leap and say, oh, this will look like this in physical. But as we've gone on over time and we've upskilled a lot of things internally, externally, the designers and the merchants have really come along, and so much so where the leadership is like, where's the 3D? Where's the 3D? They want to see it in this way. So it's kind of, it goes with the 3D usage question that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's like, it just takes time, you just have to, and you have to be patient with everybody. Once they get it, they get it. And it's like magic. It really, and it helps the product in the end of the day, because we'll see first fit and be able to approve right away, so that's the beauty of it. It has been difficult in some cases, and it still is. It's never going to be perfect, but I think it's gaining that one word, that trust, that's the ticket, just showing them that it can work.
Yeah. And it takes a few seasons, sometimes a few years, as technology evolves, for people
Right.
to feel comfortable that over time they have a trust level. It wasn't just one sample, digital sample, that turned out great. Like season after season, okay, we're seeing success, and there's a comfort level that it's pretty real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It always blows my mind when I'm in fit and they're like, let's see this in 3D. Well, how did it look in 3D? I'm like, okay, let's pull it up.
That's awesome. Well, Libby, you gave us a great segue into our next topic, which is the reality of 3D skill sets. So talking about this, we're thinking about both the skill set of team members internally. So Gina mentioned TDs, if they feel comfortable themselves making a change and it helps them to not have to get another sample, they might do that. Not required necessarily, but they might do that if they feel comfortable. And then we had a lot of questions around vendor capabilities and what happens when you have varied skill sets across your vendor base when you're first starting out, especially. Well, I guess even when you get a little further into it as well. So my question is, were teams able to train current employees or were new team members needed to be hired to implement 3D for your organization? Gina, do you want to go first?
So I think, so what we have, we definitely have super users that that are able to, they kind of heavy into the program and really kind of are very knowledgable and can help other team members if there are questions. But for us, the Browseware training that's offered, that's the online program that they have, that has been the Browseware University, that's what it's called. That has been amazing and really has helped team members be able to kind of learn at their own pace, as well as troubleshoot if they have a question about how to address something, or maybe there's a new something in the program they're able to kind of address on their own, and then roll up the question to the super user if they're not able to solve.
Oh, nice. That's nice. How about vendor capabilities? How do you accommodate the different 3D capabilities of vendors in the 3D sampling and approval process? Libby and Elizabeth, do you want to take that one?
I'll answer the training one for Walmart too.
Sure.
But you guys can have more information. So ours is pretty similar to Gina's. We do have super users that can help with team members that have questions or problems. I was trained. I was trained at a previous company before coming to Walmart. Libby was actually my trainer. I was using a different software program before. And then we also have group training sessions throughout the year to share information or to focus on problems that team members are having difficulty on in 3D.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
All
then,
right.
oh yeah.
Were you gonna say something else?
No. I was just skipping ahead.
I think we have a visual from Kim. We haven't heard much from Kim yet. Kim, do you want to talk us through this one?
Sure. This is 3D visuals of an infant pair of pants. And this is, we're looking at it in opaque with the fabrics that, we've had scanned for the actual physics and the properties. And we're looking at it in the opaque view and then also in the transparent view. And this is a block. So we have reference lines on the block that map to the form. And that's why we look at it in transparent, so that we can be sure that, the hip line is aligning with the hip, the knee, etc. And we're looking at the center of the leg. What you're seeing on the left is after we got the sewn sample, there was a little bit on the sewn sample, and you'll see that maybe in a slide coming up, where it kind of puffed out a little bit underneath that waistband. And so we're using the styling tools to kind of shrink that area. So what we're doing now is we're taking this 3D image and we're making it look more like our sewn sample. Okay, because there are some things that, will occur in construction that you're not seeing in 3D necessarily. In this case, I think it's because we have a waistband in the front that's not elasticized, and in the back it is. And so where that joint is in real life, you get a little, it's in 3D, we're getting a little bit of a poof there, but in real life, and you'll see in the other slides coming up, we're not getting it.
Okay. And I could imagine that depending on people's experience level, both just industry experience, knowing what fabric kind of does and what half elastic kind of does, people might adjust this using the styling tool in different ways, right? Some people might adjust it, some people might not, some vendors might adjust it.
Yes.
Yeah. So a level of variability there. Awesome. Okay. Moving into garment evaluation. Oh, here, I think is the picture you were talking about, Kim.
Yep, this is the picture of the real life sample on the left, and then the 3D image that has been touched up with the styling tool. so that we can make sure that we have a final 3D image that is as close to our real sewn sample as possible. And one thing I might add is, you know, the thing about 3D, when you get a real sewn sample in, the first thing you do is you measure it and check it against the specs and check to see that nothing happened to it, you know, that it is measuring within tolerance. And if it's not, then you're troubleshooting. You're going, okay, what happened to this? Is it in the fabric? Did something happen with the fabric? Is it in the cutting? Is it in the sewing? Is it in the construction? You know, you're troubleshooting that. We're eliminating that with 3D because it's, I can take that same pattern and I can do it in 3D every time, and I can get those same results because I'm not worrying about what accidentally got cut off, what accidentally got sewn off, or maybe the tension wasn't quite the same on the machine, you know, so those things you're kind of eliminating.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so talking more, we had a question from the audience. Have you reviewed 3D protos side by side with physical fits on a form or model to make decisions? So this is one good example, and we have another one from you, Kim. Could you talk us through this one?
Sure. This is our men's dress shirt block. And on the left, you're seeing the first iteration of it. And we decided that the ease over body at the neck was a little bit it wasn't enough. So we increased it from 1.75, or we decreased it, I'm sorry, it was too much. We decreased it from 2.25 to 1.75. And then we did a sleeve rotation on it also to get rid of some of the drag lines. So here you're looking at, you know, the transparent, the opaque, and then the actual sample. And then on the right-hand side is the view 2 of it after the neck has been adjusted. These changes are very minimal. I'd say a lot of brands might not even do a second sample for a change that is that minimal. We're a little unique. We're not a brand. We're developing blocks that are used by brands. So we are super particular about things, and we will do, you know, many iterations of 3D, and we will compare it to the sewn sample just to make sure that we've got it right. And on the lower right-hand side is the pressure map. So we're looking at it also in that way to see how that changes, how those changes have affected the sample from view 1 to view 2.
That's awesome. I can definitely tell that sleeve rotation cleans up the, you know, the front of that armhole. That looks awesome. Okay, I think we have another example from Gina.
So this is an example from our virtual fit approval library where we're basically, and I think we talked about this a little bit in the last webinar, but we're keeping kind of a history of styles that have been virtually fit approved, and then what does the physical look like, just to kind of keep that information sharing going with our cross-functional teams. And as a good reference for the tech team, if they want to, for whatever reason, give a look to that as well. So here we have the original sketch, and then the virtual rendering, and then on the right is the physical version of it.
I think this is so awesome, Gina, because it does help you build that confidence over time with existing team members. And even if you had someone new come into the organization who'd never been exposed to 3D before, you can kind of take them through that history to say, you know, it's going to be okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Or at least some categories are going to be okay.
I'm glad you showed this, because this is kind of going back to what I was alluding to, that you have verified digital garments, essentially. You have garments that are verified, that are in your library, that you might want to consider using that label in the future to even further give confidence to the team that these have been verified, right? We've had success here. So developing that verified digital garment library, I think is a huge key to success in the future.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's kind of closing the loop, right? You see it all in development, but then you see it all come together at the end. It's just an amazing library history.
And I just noticed they're all styled the same at the neck too. Look at that. So it's same across the board.
It really is. I like that. Oh, I think that's a good segue too. Okay, here's another question from the audience. Can you show real-time updates with design before confirming changes and getting a physical sample? Libby and Elizabeth, how do you feel about that? Oh, did I lose them?
Sorry. Repeat that again.
Oh, sorry. Can you show real-time updates with design before confirming changes and getting a
Yes.
sample?
Elizabeth was going to take this.
So yes, you can, but it depends upon like user skill set and also timing. Sometimes like our cross-functional partners do not want to wait and see it being done. Like they'd rather just see a photo of
Right.
it finished.
If it's like if you're in a meeting and it's got to end at said time,
Yeah.
and you're just looking, yeah, we'll sometimes edit, show them and say, is this okay? But some things are easier done, right away, but you just have to, you have to pick and choose. And some categories are easier.
And how
to look at.
complex the garment is too, because some take longer to render than others. So timing.
Yeah,
But you
very
can-
true.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's definitely faster than going and finding sample fabric and
Making-
sewing it up.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, how about in what areas are you able to approve fit in 3D? Speaking of that, how about this one, Gina?
So this is just an example of kind of different scenarios. So we have on the left, we've got something that's based on a block and it's really close to what the block is. And so it's super easy to just kind of say, yeah, that's dropping in a fabric that that we know is very similar to what the block is made in. And we can go ahead and fit approve that, no problem. I think one of the really good benefits about being able to use virtual is getting to look at that block pattern and then look at the virtual pattern as the new pattern as well, and verify that nothing has changed or nothing's kind of scary or alarming looking, and we're able to say, yep, it's all the same. And then we've got another version on the right where it's based on or very similar to a carryover style, using the same base cloth and same silhouette. So maybe it's just a pocket change or where a yoke is sitting or something like that. So the team, again, feels really confident in going ahead with fit approval before actually seeing it on a human.
Yeah, and this would be a nice way to kind of ease people in without a high level of risk, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay, we had a question from the audience about going from one static pose to another. So the question is, when going from one static pose to another, can the rendering between the movements be relied upon? Which is kind of tricky. So I'm going to have Kim explain this one to us. What are we looking at here, Kim?
This is a, excuse me, a toddler shirt. And we just did this one just for this presentation, just to show you going from an arms down position to an arms forward position. And then she has used the freeze pose where she's, frozen it and then looked at it in the pressure map. So I would say that's a way that you could use it, going from one pose to another, maybe using that pressure map. But I know that usually with the avatars themselves too, it is recommended that you're doing that final fit, on the finished pose, like arms down, arms forward, arms up, whatever that final pose is. And that in between, it's not always that reliable.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have a video from you also, Kim, that helps explain this a little, kind of what happens in the in-between movement part.
Yeah, and so this is a skirt that I thought it would be good to show it changing from one pose to another. So please forgive me, I am putting it in a pose that's not very ladylike. It's a crouching pose, like you're going to be sitting. But we were talking about this earlier, and ones were saying you wouldn't really do that in a skirt. You'll see in a minute. But so first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the pose. I changed it to an arms forward pose so that her arms were out of the way so you could see it. And then now I'm putting her into like a seated pose, and I'm stopping it mid simulation and just kind of spinning it around so you could see. And what you'll see when you zoom in kind of close here, well, here we're looking at it in a pressure map, but there are some areas where the fabric is colliding with the avatar. You know, the fabric isn't in the final position. You can see that kind of down by the knee there a little bit. You know, so mid pose, you're not getting the best results with your fabrics and trims and stuff like that. So we will very rarely ever use that for a fit analysis going in between poses. And then I'm going to change her back to kind of I'm going to finish simulating here. And then I'm going to change her back into kind of a casual pose. And, you know, when you're changing poses too, your garment is moving around. We try to use as few styling tools as possible. If you think about it like you're putting a garment on a dress form or on a person, when you put it on, you're going to go in and you're going to adjust it to make it hang, you know, right on the body. And it's the same way when you change poses. That skirt has moved around with that body. So it's not sitting at that natural waist anymore. And so just like when you stand up from a seated position, you might tug on your shirt, you might adjust your pants or your skirt or something like that. So the same thing is happening in 3D where we're using the styling tools and looking at it in transparent view as well to kind of realign it and get it back in its original position, or the best that it can be. And then once you've used those styling tools, resimulating it again so that it kind of naturally falls where it should be. So this is a casual pose, and you'll notice these balance lines, they're lining up in the front, but because she's kind of tilted at an angle too, you're not going to get those balance lines to align with the landmarks on the form, you know, so that's another reason why not to really use you know, mid simulation or these poses necessarily for fit.
Because you're not going to be making corrections in mid simulation, right? You're making corrections in the static state, or it may be possibly at the end of the pose, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Videos are always so fun. Thank you, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
It helps to see it in real life as it's happening. Okay, we had a question about looking at full size sets in 3D. Do you look at full sets and size sets in 3D, and what do you use it for? So Kim, I think this one is yours also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love using 3D for size sets because, you know, we're using it in development, but for size sets too, it's so nice to be able to look at least the jump sizes. And this is a shirt, and I have removed the collar and the cuffs on it, and I don't have the placket on it. And I'm looking at it in transparent just to look at those graded jump sizes and make sure that the grade is working and that all of those reference lines are aligning to those body landmarks. So,
you know, Kim, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do need to just to reiterate for the people that are watching right now, this is at the block level. This is not at the style level. So these images you're looking at are very much being looked at for the base garment blocks. Sorry to interrupt.
Yep, no, I'm glad you clarified that, because in the next slide too, you'll notice this is development too. These are not final 3D images. So I didn't go through the work of putting the front placket on and the buttons. I didn't need to see that, you know, so I'm skipping a lot of things in product development just to save time, but also be able to accurately look at it.
Awesome.
And this is just another side view, back view of those jump sizes. And it's very tricky, as many of you might know, going from a core size 40 up to a you know, a men's 52 in a grade to get it to look really nice and balanced.
Yeah, because the body shape is changing quite drastically across that many sizes, right?
Right. Yep.
All right, and then we have, I love these. Kim, will you explain what's happening here?
Yeah, so this is the same shirt, and I just dropped the sleeve and the collar and transparent view again, and then lifted the arms up so I can look at that armhole shape and what's happening before the sleeve actually get sewn in place. Especially when I've already looked at the garment with the sleeves sewn in, and I want to kind of troubleshoot that area. So it's nice to be able to remove it and look at it from another perspective. And think of how much time this would take if I requested samples.
Very
Again,
cool.
here, this is another one where transparent view, I'm looking at it without the collar stand, just checking the alignment, because I want to make sure that that shoulder seam is aligning at the high point of the shoulder on all the sizes before everything comes in.
So super important in the block building phase, you want to build the absolute best fitting, balanced garment you can, because everything in your line is going to come from this afterwards.
Mhm.
So worth taking the time and many iterations to get it right. Okay. Libby and Elizabeth, we have this example, which we actually showed in the last webinar, but I think it's kind of fun to also look at brand product as opposed to looking at block development. Can you walk us through what you guys did on this particular garment using this?
So this is actually, kind of Elizabeth's world with the kids, because as we know, grading on kids is a totally different, totally different way to look at grading than what I'm used to in women's, where her inseam stays the same. So you can, if you want to go ahead and.
Oh, so
kinda
this
speak
is
to it.
from one of our other super users. She's just looking at this full size run and then just making sure the pressure and everything is the same.
Yeah, you can see exactly where things are hitting. You can, compare that pressure and tension map to the base size that's already approved. So that's the way that we've been really utilizing it, is not just looking at the graded nest once we approve something. We can really see how it's going to hit on each set on the forms. And what's nice is in 3D, as opposed to, I'm always thinking 3D versus physical, right? Physical, if we were to see this full graded size set, the sample room would have to sew up every single one. In 3D, you're doing one time and you're just clicking for that sewing, and then it will, once you apply the grade to the avatars, it'll automatically, you can just dress them as is, and you only have to sew once, which is what I love. People get so kind of hung up on this in training. I know it's like a very intimidating thing to look at a full size set, but it's actually really easy in 3D.
And it's also
Yeah, you
important
only
to know
have to
that,
sew it once, right?
yeah, that some people might not have all these physical forms. Some companies, they might only have like 2 extended size ranges. So this one you can see them all,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to numeric sizing. Yeah.
Mhm. True. Awesome. Thank you, Lace. And this is a pretty complex garment, right? Because you've got this skirt, which is probably, I'm guessing, one fabrication, and then this stretchy short, but it's all attached together. Maybe it's the same fabric for the skirt. I'm not sure. But I would think that would take some skill to get that to look just right.
Yeah, that's a lot of girls' items are very like, here's the short underneath, and going, you have to have all that matching going into the waistband. It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, switching gears, we had a number of questions about avatars and standards and kind of what's coming soon, coming next. Donna, I might need your help to explain this section, but we were given some information that I think is helpful. So questions from the audience kind of centered around, has Alvanon made any progress on movement or animation? And the other thing they wanted to know about was soft body technology, so flesh. And what we can say is we're working on it. Everybody in the industry is working on it. And we all want it like yesterday. So it can't come soon enough, but it is a process of R&D to get there. And so we're working on it internally and with third parties as well, because somebody eventually is going to figure this out, and we'll all be able to use it. So One of the exciting things that came along with the more human-like avatars, which I'll show you a picture of that in a second, is the development of a different kind of, almost think of it like a skeletal structure. So it's mesh, but the new Alva mesh allows the Alva form to handle more complex poses. So kind of inching toward getting ready for animation. But the big thing in Alvanon's philosophy is back in the day, like you guys maybe when you tested 3D technology years ago when it was kind of new, when the avatar would move, it sort of looked like Gumby, like it didn't have a skeleton inside. The thing about using the body standard and then making it move, whether you're talking about a pose or animation, is you want the things like the underarm. Don always uses that example. When you raise the underarm of a dress form, there's nothing inside there, right? You could take the arm completely off. But as an avatar, you actually need an armpit to be able to fit a sleeveless garment or any type of a garment. So building in that mesh to be able to represent what really happens to a body and have it be accurate anthropomorphically is really important. So that's kind of what Alvanon has been working on and made significant progress in that. So we're pretty excited about that. So this allows us all to have consistent and accurate body shapes across the enterprise. So whether you're using an avatar like the ones on the left for fitting purposes, by the tech team, or you're adding more human-like features. This one in the middle, you can see she has more developed features on her face. She's got fingers and a thumb. And a lot of designers especially really like that more human-like appearance. Or you're going all the way to the reality of skin texture and features and things like that. The beauty of it is it allows for consistency in your body standard, shape, size, stature across that entire range of avatars that you might be using.
Yeah, Tracy, if I might just go ahead and add here, you're doing a great job of explaining this. We've heard this feedback for several years now, right? Especially the early adopters in 3D. They have their cross-functional teams that just, forgive me for saying, they don't look at Adobe FitForm, right? And I'm really, really proud of Jason and the team because they heard this early on. And the adoption of the Alva mesh and all that technology that's going into this is going toward to help to solve that for people in the future, right? And it's a lot of work. And like I said, Jason and team, the Wangs, they've been all over this, but it does take time. And we're kind of, working on our piece of the puzzle to help solve for the friction that our clients might feel in using this consistent tool all the way through an enterprise. So super important work. And I know that the clients are delighted when they're able to take advantage of these kind of things.
Mm-hmm. So this just gives you a view of, a men and women version of the different types of realistic and accurate avatar poses that you might want to use in the fitting process, or your designer might want to use to show her show product in a more realistic pose than the kind of fit form pose. Excuse me. There we go. And then some other fun ones. The babies are always my favorite. But for those of you who haven't seen the more human-like features, they're kind of fun. And the human-like standard poses come with 5 additional poses. So you're looking at them here, which I think for fitting purposes is just awesome. It makes a huge difference. And being able to use heat mapping in those different poses, you can really make some decisions and feel fairly comfortable before you get that initial first fit sample. And then we do also develop custom poses. That is an option if you have, like you can tell, this is obviously a yoga company, but if especially if you're a sport brand or has specific movements that your consumer is doing, and you want to test for that in 3D, those can also be built. Okay. Switching gears. We had a question from the audience last time about virtual quality standards. So we thought it might be nice. I'm not sure if everyone in the audience even knows what we mean when we say virtual quality standards and how that might be different from the quality standards that you already have in place, which every brand has some in place. But how are they different and how are they utilized? So a special thank you to Libby, who reached out to her Browseware partners, and they allowed us to use their examples of virtual quality standards. So she's going to walk us through kind of what that means. There are many more pages to this, but we kind of wanted to hit the highlights. Super interesting and lots of information to share here. So I'm going to turn it over to Libby.
Okay, so what's important to note is that this is going to be a different look than what your traditional manual methods of measure, what the construction should be for certain categories. This is going to look a little different. It's not the same because it's a virtual quality standard, because virtual quality is not, it relates to physical, but how it's done in the virtual world might have to be different to show what it needs in order to look like the physical, right? So you've got the definition, which is great to have in your virtual quality standards for those who are just getting started. What does this mean? It's going to be different for every company, but you have all the components that go into the sample, right? And you need to be able to identify and define things such as file naming across the categories. What do you want that, how it's supposed to be dressed? You know, when we're looking at items on a form for fit, we want to know, we're looking at how the supplier put it on the form versus how we are putting it on the form front, side, and back. So we want all of those standards to look the same across. So we're kind of looking at, we know we're looking at the same thing. So a lot of things, you know, maybe you're not looking at something in the beginning of the development process, like some things you're not seeing, like the inside lining, pockets. So maybe you don't need that for development, but maybe you do need it for fitting going forward. There's things in 3D that you can definitely hide or utilize to your benefit. And then what do you want to use as your communication tool? For Browseware, there's Style Zone. I know Clo has Closet. There's file sharing you can do easily with, you know, OneDrive, things like that. How do you want to communicate these items to your cross-functional and outwardly to your factories, right? So this is another slide that just kind of goes into what an introduction of how you want to use these garments and what the standards should be. Do you want it to be high quality or do you want it to be just basic? There's certain things in 3D that will give you more detail coming across. It's similar to how you look at a picture with DPI. Do you want that to be like 72 DPI dots per inch for a picture, or do you want to see it more clear, you know, 300 DPI? It's similar to that, but we have to put it in terms of 3D usage. And all of this kind of it's important to get the training that comes along with it to understand what goes into it so that you're not, I know some of this to me was like a different language whenever I first started. So it's important to just understand how digital works versus physical, right? And what can you expect? This is such a great example of how you can say, okay, I want my bottoms to fit here. I don't want you to pull them up or put them down. You know, now they have 3D dressing tapes where you can make sure that that standard is set across. And I send those tapes to my vendors and say, okay, if you're making a garment, I want it to, you know, sit here. So it's how do you want that standard to be so that you're not looking at fit in a different way in 3D as you are in physical. And then what are these workflows? So how do you want these 3D assets to be made? How do you want the fabric to be tested? And what stage do you need that fabric to be tested? Is it okay to use substitute fabric in the beginning? Is it okay to not have everything, you know, there in the beginning? Yes, maybe in some cases, but you've got to define that in your VQS, what is acceptable and what is not. And then the components that are necessary. So you've got to have the right avatar. You've got to have the pattern that you're proposing. This is important to us because we want to know, like, if that dress is going to hit midi length or maxi. We want to know that that pattern is correct to that standard. Otherwise, you know, we might get it during fit and we're like, wait a second, we thought that it was going to be this and design thought it was going to be this. You know, where is that one moment of truth? That's where 3D can come in and say, okay, everybody agreed on this.
So Libby, you're doing a great job of explaining this, but have you had vendors try to work with a stretch and fit avatar and get away with using that as a standard avatar?
We've definitely had moments, not lately because we are we're testing out a process where the VQS is integrated, but we did have an issue with, you know, wrong avatars being used, especially in ladies. We have a few different avatars for different categories, and there's some specific avatars that we like to use for swim and intimates that really help with how it lays on the body and how it shows. So a lot of times, like, our comments back will be like, wrong avatar, or use this block, or, you know, it's all about trying to minimize like the you would never. I think what's interesting is who is building it might be different than who is going to fit it at the end. So it's important to get those pieces, those people talking, and okay, here's, you know, what 3D does is bring people together. I really feel like it brings the graphics team together. You know, technical might reach out to the graphics team for a graded graphic or something so that we can look at it. It's bringing, yeah, you want the right recipe. It's bringing the merchant team together and saying, okay, this is the final, or is this acceptable? Do you want to buy this? You know, it's really cool to have all of those pieces talk now, whereas opposed to the workflow was so-and-so starts here and then it ends here and then it gets passed off and then it gets passed off. Right now we're coming to a table all at once and saying, you know, if that technical will be there and say, if that silhouette is not right, I can tell you, you know, I can tell the factory how much we want to increase the fullness by. So as long as all, and that's what VQS is for, as long as all of that is defined and what we get is what we're asking for from the beginning, it makes it so much quicker and faster to align as a team.
So the 3D is a wonderfully collaborative tool, but the VQS is the rules of the road.
Yes, Thank you. That's exactly right.
So Liv, this
Yeah.
picture is, or this page is all about blocks and asset requirements.
Yeah. So this is really important. I know Kim would agree with her
Yeah.
block development. You need to, how do you want to see the block? Originally, we saw the block as like we said, okay, we want to see it in white, but then everything, the background was white and we couldn't see, sometimes it would blend into the background of our sharing platform. So we changed that up. Standards can be changed depending on how, if you're having trouble using that standard, anything can be changed. So it's just defining how you want to look at it. Do you want to see, the exact construction with the seams? Like, is this a double needle turnover? You can show that in 3D and define it there, right?
Yeah, and they should always be reviewed and updated, continuously updated. Like,
right. As the technology progresses, you do want it to be updated. So maybe there's a different way to fold in the future. There's a different way to use darts in the future. Like, all of that has changed over time. And there are some things that are more complicated than others, and you do have to make allowances. So if there's maybe like a knot or something like that that is not able to really render properly, you have to say, okay, well, what does the pattern look like versus what you have to do in 3D? And then show that in your VQS. Say, we want to see the production pattern plus, maybe a 3D adjusted if that's what you need to do. And then just looking at how you want something shared. So say you're always looking at, like for this example, the sleeve needs to be like kind of shrugged up because that's how you imagine is the end use. I know, like, we have standards for how unzipped it's going to be or how many buttons need to be undone, because nobody's really buttoning all the way to the top, so that's another virtual quality standard you can call out, is how you want it to be finally dressed, because it's got to be realistic to you, and it's got to look like what this goes hand in hand with showing design and merchants. It's got to look like something they're used to seeing,
Yeah. Well, Gina mentioned that earlier on one of her slides with the big green arrow, that they were all, for her library at the end, they were all styled consistently. So you do have that consistent picture from the start to the end. So I'm guessing Gina must have virtual quality standards.
Oh, so many.
Yeah, when I looked through this deck, I was overwhelmed, like, wow, that is so much stuff to define. But I guess then once you define it, other than updating it periodically, then you should have better consistency and not have to readdress it on every sample.
It was interesting that the question that prompted us to go here was that someone was not sure about why you needed to update or what the even quality manual was as you went through COVID, right? So you did have to go back and make some edits. Isn't that right, Gina?
It's a huge lift at the beginning, but yeah, I mean, the minor updates that you have to do as technology advances, or as the company adopts more virtual, then that's an easy thing season by season or year by year. But it is a big undertaking at the beginning. But that's why something like, I mean, it's so huge, but it's so necessary, because there's so many things to consider, and those are the nitpicky things that end up causing some doubt. So having all of this in place is so crucial.
Yeah,
that's a really
I almost
good
think
point,
that
Gina.
our VQS is more defined than our regular manual.
Well, the principles are the same, right? It's like how to measure. It doesn't matter. Everyone can do it differently. What matters is everybody's doing it the same way. So you have a consistent visual. I mean, it's really the same principle, but more important than ever in 3D.
Yeah, I think it
I
does.
really like what Gina said about eliminating doubt. Like it's some of these little nitpicky things that put doubt in someone's head that that sample's not really going to look like that. So as much of that as you can eliminate helps build trust faster. That's awesome.
So Tracy, we've got
right.
3 minutes left.
I think we did it. Don, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I just, again, can't thank you enough, ladies, for and all the work that went into this and you know, that you're so giving of your time. I know that there are a lot of people that are getting a lot out of this. And don't forget that this is recorded, okay? This session survives. So if you signed up for it and you know, and you didn't attend, it will be, I guess I can let Jordan give the salutation on that. But again, thank you so much. Tracy, great job. Kim, great job. And I know we still had some questions coming in. We'll regroup after this and figure out how we can address them going forward. But I certainly appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you guys so much. Thank all of you so much. We still have a bunch of people still on. Again, the webinar was being recorded. If you're still here with us, you'll receive an email directly from Zoom. If you had to jump off and you're watching this now, you know, afterwards, you should have received an email also from Zoom. I also just put the link into the chat for everybody. You can watch the original webinar from March 23rd, and this webinar will live on that landing page as well. So thank you everybody so much for joining us. Thanks Gina and Elizabeth and Libby and Kim and Tracy and Don, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. So long. Notice I said so long.